So I now have the honor to introduce Professor Christina Rosen, who teaches in the Geography and Urban Studies Department at Temple University. She's particularly interested in how we make cities more sustainable and just. She's the author or editor of several books, including Governing the Fragmented Metropolis, Planning for Regional Sustainability, and Planning Ideas That Matter, and Growing a Sustainable City, The Question of Urban Agriculture, and is now writing another co-authored book called Asking Radical Questions About Sustainable Cities. Professor Rosen holds her master's in city planning and PhD from MIT, and she's active in Philadelphia's sustainability community and eager to use her research to inform practice. This morning, Dr. Rosen will describe how researchers will need to answer pressing questions about the future of metropolitan regions and how policy, behavioral, and technological pathways can help us more equitably mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis. So with that, Dr. Tina Rosen.
Thank you for having me. I met Karen Cito last year, and she invited me over the summer and told me that this is my opportunity to kind of talk about what I would like to see as a vision for the future. So if you read the abstract, it sounds awesome and I'm going to solve all the problems. That's because Karen told me I was allowed to do that. So then I got stuck with trying to figure out how do I actually do that. So let me start by thinking, I'm going to start by asking a question. And this is a question that recently has been kind of stressing me out. And the question is, are we going to be okay? You know? So I'm going to tell you more about that. And the second question I have is, can broken governance systems function under stress, right? So we're thinking, I'm seeing a lot of scary maps of climate change, but I've done a lot of research about metropolitan governance, and it's like not an innovative system, right? So I've started to wonder, well, if you have a really broken system and then you add more stress to it and you ask it to do something really difficult, can it do it? And I think the answer is no. And so I think what I really want to argue is that we need policy innovation in conjunction with technological innovation, and we need collaboration. And we talked a little bit about hubris earlier. We need to get rid of that. We need to start collaborating across disciplines, across universities. We need to collaborate with community members. We need to collaborate with policymakers. We need to really respect that we're all in this boat together. And we are about to face enormous challenges. We actually have no idea how to solve these problems yet. We have some exciting innovations, but we're going to have to try them. We're going to fail in some places. We're going to succeed in some places. They're going to be winners, losers. We're going to have to figure out a fair way to get out of that. We're going to need research that policymakers can use. So one of the things that I teach in a Geography and Urban Studies department, and one of the challenges that I have, and students would often come to my class like, oh, you actually want me to try to solve this? Yes, you're going to have to try to solve this. We actually need policies and researchers to help inform policymakers, and we need to actually try to solve something. We need to test things. We need to refine them. And we also need to use equity as a lens, right? So everything, we were talking earlier about outcomes. The outcome that I want to leave at the end is we want equitable, sustainable regions, and we need systems to get us there. So that's my goal, and I got to build back, and it means I might have to jet some of the systems because they were not built to give me that outcome. The current governance systems that we use in the United States particularly, and that's what I'm talking about, are designed to reproduce inequity, right? They're designed to protect property values, to protect your stuff. It's the growth machine, Logan and Molich, 1970s research. We're trying to maximize property values. We're not thinking long-term about big structural problems of sea level rise, super hot environments. We got to get people out of places. We're going to have to figure out how to spend billions of dollars to protect communities. So I'm going to argue that we need to kind of, it's not even, for me, it's not even last year. this is a new year, right? I was in the Youth Climate March in Philadelphia recently. There are little kids out on the street with signs saying, we're gonna die. You know, why are you educating us? What is this for? I was recently brought into a 5th grade class at my kids' school because the kids are freaking out, right? So they said, can you come and talk to them about environmental change, climate change? What's Philadelphia doing? So I came to them and I took some of the presentation that I usually give and I deleted some of it because I thought, I don't want to stress them out, right? So I am going to go, so I came to them and I said, you know, the first thing to know about is Philadelphia's still gonna be here, right? So Philadelphia, it's gonna be hotter, wetter. We're actually thinking we're gonna get some climate refugees. But from the maps, I could tell you that the refinery is underwater and the airport is gone, right? And there's some parts, but we're not planning proactively to address that, right? That would be, if given that we're talking about planning as like a 50-year time horizon, we should be having big discussions about how to protect the airport, why we should not reopen the refinery in the floodplain, right? So these are the kinds of questions that we need to be having. I decided I'm not gonna totally put that on the 5th graders. So for the 5th graders, I started talking about innovation, things that we're actually doing in Philadelphia that are exciting. So if you read about Philadelphia, we're doing great green infrastructure planning, and we've recognized city and nature goes together, and actually to capture this rainwater, we're gonna need to rethink the city. We're gonna do green roofs, rain barrels, bioswales. We're gonna have pervious paving, and we're gonna push this around the city. So the kids really like that, and some of them, their parents have, rain barrels on their houses, and it's great. And so I was excited about that. The kids kept coming back to me saying, but the world's gonna end, right? The world's gonna end. I was like, oh, okay. So they're kind of bumming me out, and so what I want to do today is to talk a little bit about some of my research, where I've been thinking about it going, and kind of, back to Karen's call of like, if you could get a lot of money and solve these problems, kind of what would you do? So here, I don't know, is this? Okay. So here, I like this map because this map doesn't freak you out in the same way, but here's the climate hazards. This is Climate Central. It looks really pretty. It's not that bad, right? You're in the red zone, it's all right. Okay, so, this one makes me a little more nervous. This is a recent study, and I see a lot of flooding in places I live and care about, and a lot of cities, right? This one makes me, sorry, did I lose? Oh yeah, this is Houston. This makes me nervous, right? So, we got to figure out how to protect this place. Maybe we can't. I think that's also the other issue. Like, there are going to be some decisions we're actually going to have to make that are. There is going to be a little bit of triage going on in this future system. And in a system that's built about protecting your local community, it's very hard to say to people, you're the mayor of the town that's not going to be there. Right? So we got to figure out how to have more of a regional conversation. Here's Philadelphia. It's hotter, it's wetter. The little 5th graders were like, why is it all wet? I was like, no, it's just a drawing. So don't worry, you're fine. This is Philadelphia, right? So we're there, move to Philadelphia. I'm like, my house is fine. We are, but make planning decisions that acknowledge the future, right? We also know that it's going to be hotter and wetter, and we know that your ability to adapt depends on who you are, where you live, what's the tree cover, what's the urban heat island effect. Do you have solar panels on your roof with a Tesla battery that when the power goes out that you're fine, you can run the air conditioning? We see in California, do you have your own firefighter that is protecting your house? So really thinking from in the future, we're going to be having to think about how to prepare communities so that everybody can weather the hotter, wetter temperatures or whatever is coming to different communities. So one thing that I think is really important to think about is like every region is going to have a set of different problems, and we're going to need to start being very proactive about those particular problems and how to respond to them. And we need to start innovating, particularly at the university level and working with local stakeholders. Here's a picture of, this is Miami. This is looking at social vulnerability. One of the things I really appreciate about, I teach in geography and urban studies, and the ability of mapping to help us identify risk is really important. And it helps us think about equity, because if you know that a particular group of people is very vulnerable, you need to focus on protecting them, right? So it's not, I always say equity is not when you go out to dinner, everyone splits the check. Equity is like the rich friend pays for more, and the friend who can't afford it, you help that person out, right? So here, there are gonna be some people in the climate transition who are not going to be able to afford to pay the bill, and we're going to have to figure out how to pay for them. And I think that also means we need to change our governance structure and how we're thinking about planning. I also think that this was October 29th. There are some massive questions that I think we really need to be thinking about, like countries, right? Where are they going? What are they going to do? You know, are these models, this is not my expertise, but like, which model should we be planning for? It's very hard to plan when you don't know what is going to happen. But I would argue you should expect the worst, plan for the worst, right? You know, and I think we're starting to see, you know, the fifth graders are feeling it. You know, this is the New York Times, it's the end of California as we know it. But we do also have, you know, cities are, this is Miami. Cities are in a sense trying to argue that we're going to be okay. We could rise above it, and the growth machine can still work. So keep investing in Miami, and you know, keep coming. And we're going to protect it. Technological fixes are going to figure it out. So that my first argument is really that, like, we got to wake up and think about the scale of this problem. And it's big. So the next thing that recently has sort of cracked me up is that I have been working on this idea of governance for years. It's the kind of topic that puts people to sleep. People think you're just boring, but we know we need it, right? So that's what's been cracking me up is well, if we just fix the governance, and then I think, ooh, that is a tough cookie, because, you know, and also, like, it's a snooze fest for a lot of people, and it means you're going to have to really get in deep and ask the question of what is governance, right? What are all the multiple components that make us make bad decisions or make us make good decisions? That's really how I think about governance. So here's some, you know, I tell my students not to do this, but I like to think about, like, where we get our knowledge from. So here's what Wikipedia says. You know, it's all the processes of governing. So, I mean, that's hard to understand, right? That's hard to research. It's a network. And, you know, here's the action or manner of governing. So I noticed in the IPCC report that there's mention of governance. So we got to strengthen multi-level governance. So there seems to be some growing concern that governance is a problem, right? We have a problem. We think governance could help us, but we're not exactly sure what governance is. And this kind of maps onto research that I've been doing for many years, thinking about metropolitan planning. So I initially came to be interested in metropolitan planning because I had grown up in New York, and I had just had sort of a visceral reaction to the suburbs as a kid, and I just couldn't understand how you could, like, make these decisions, and what happened, why is this happening? And I remember that my dissertation advisor, he would say, you can't just write that you hate it, right? And I was like, okay, all right, fine. So I'm going to write it in a much more kind of theoretical way. So here, all right, so part of the issue, and this is from 2009, and you know, 2009 is actually starting to be a long time ago, but so basically, if you're interested in metropolitan governance, what I can tell you is that we've known for a long time that we have a problem, and we've done very little about it, right? So here, this is 2009, outdated metropolitan political structures are an important part of the problem. Highly fragmented governance systems contribute to increasing sprawl, congestion. Oh, so this is good, because so I'm not getting to, now I'm sort of operationalizing what I hate about the suburbs. Growing racial and economic segregation, deepening disparities in the quality of local services. And here, we're back to the, we need it, right? Metropolitan governance is central, we need more, so we keep going. Okay, so this is me, again, trying to operationalize the sort of deep hatred of the lollipop structure of living in a cul-de-sac. And this was like, what is the problem with the way that we are developing our regions? And there's a lot of research that the regions have been growing, we're very fragmented, we have a lot of sprawl. It's a very inefficient allocation of resources, right? So if everybody has their own school and their own police force, and that is an inefficient, you're just kind of reproducing things, but you're also using a lot of roads, and also you're increasing driving, and from a climate change perspective, like CO2 emissions, this is really not a way of planning for a sustainable region. So if you were to actually have the equity outcome, you would never design this system, right? So I think that's something we need to say. We need to say, this system that we currently live in is really unsustainable. So part of the research that I did, so basically I wrote a book that came out on November 2nd or something of 2016. And it came out with this idea, like, the next president is going to go for metropolitan. We're starting to really see the need for metropolitan solutions. And I mean, it was just a bummer because it just dropped like a lead balloon, and even the reviews of it are like, interesting book, bad timing, right? So that's the issue here. So, okay, so this is Boston. So if you were going to design a sustainable region, I don't think you'd pick this model, but we talked earlier about all the historical things that get us here. So every community, this is 101 cities and towns. This is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So they do the planning for the region, but they're not the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the federal government gives, for any region more than 50,000 people, the federal government requires that you have what's called an MPO, a Metropolitan Planning Organization. And that is so that you can distribute transportation dollars in a region. And the idea of the MPO was very kind of thoughtful about the need to collaborate. But one thing that's very interesting in Boston, this is one of the reasons I picked it, is like the transportation dollars don't map with the land use planning decisions. So immediately when you think about, oh, why did we get this really weird, bad decision? Transportation's here, land use is here, right? We're not necessarily mapping these together. Although I will argue that MAPC, the planners, they know this is a problem, and they have figured out every possible way they can try to link transportation and land use together using non-regulatory systems, and also by going to the state government and pushing for more regulation. So the problem with this kind of region is that it leads to very inequitable outcomes. And one of the things I've really appreciated recently are these sort of these opportunity indices where you get to see, imagine if you're born in the red area, you have very high opportunity. So you breathe fresh air, and your school is great, and all these great things come with living in this fragmented system. And people in those suburban communities are often trying to protect, they want to stay in this very high opportunity zone. So that means they might make decisions that, from a sustainability perspective, do not make any sense, right? 2-acre lots, 1-acre lots. But from a financial perspective, they make a lot of sense. Very few school children, right? So you're blind. So I think one of the things that we really need to understand is, like, what are the systems that we use for planning? What are they designed to give you, right? This is designed to give you a very inequitable outcome. But now we talked earlier about like participation. So a lot of people love Massachusetts, open town meeting, open town meeting for all the sort of democratic participatory stuff. It's very hard to do anything progressive in an open town meeting because a lot of people who don't want change will just pop into your meeting and stop you from densifying your community. So it's really hard. So when we wonder, like, why did they make these terrible decisions? Why did they not do smart growth? Why is there no transit-oriented development? Why is there no affordable housing? Part of it is the governance structure, right? What are the rules for decision making? And particularly if we know that the people who show up at meetings tend to be property owners, older, white, richer, when they can show up and pack the house and stop more equitable things like affordable housing from coming into the communities, they're able to protect the boundary in a way that is highly unfair. So from a local perspective, you might think it's democratic, but from a regional perspective, it's highly undemocratic, and it leads to exactly the inequitable outcomes that we would expect. And for climate change, we're gonna have the same problem with, so here is a map, and we're gonna have this is actually already, right? So if you live in the city, it is way hotter, right? Versus if you live in the leafy suburbs with the nice schools and less air pollution and stuff. So this is part of the conversation that we need to start having. How do we coordinate across these boundaries? How do we start to think about my problem as your problem, and I have resources that can help you, and actually it's not fair for me to just protect my own and not think about a region. I think MAPC has done a good job of trying to get the political leaders to come together to start this conversation. And I would argue that climate change is making us be more cooperative because there's not enough money for us all to protect ourselves, right? We can't, so particularly in the Boston region, you're talking about some communities that are gonna be dealing with massive flooding. We're also gonna be dealing with bombogenesis, cyclones, snowstorms. We're gonna, do you have enough money for your snow removal? We are also gonna deal with water treatment plants that are in floodplains. We're gonna have to protect these places. So I think that there is a window, and I would love to see more research on what are the best practices for this collaboration, and how do we sort of undo the existing system while maintaining democratic principles, but leading towards the outcome of a more sustainable region. So that is really my first question. Can a broken system lead to good outcomes? I don't think so. And I think this final point, we actually need to accept that our current system is just not, we're really unprepared. We're not ready for what's about to hit us. I do want to recognize that when you talk about metropolitan governance, people get scared, right? Because you're coming after their political participation. You're threatening their school system. The school system, like a third rail of planning. You're telling people you're going to densify. They're going to lose their parking spaces. You're going to ask them to live in smaller houses, or you're going to they take away their cars and put them in public transit. So people tend to not necessarily respond well to this idea of there's a big regional government that's going to tell you how to live, and there's a thought that it sort of undermines local innovation, right? Every community can make their own decisions, and that's really exciting. There's also the thought, this is the way we've always done it, and we could just sort of we can tweak our system to deal with the future needs. Okay, so I think it's clear that we do need a metropolitan solution, but one of the challenges is thinking about what does it look like. As I mentioned, in the US, any city of more than 50,000 people has an MPO, and that's where federal money comes in for transportation spending. However, they all have different kind of levels of authority, right? So some states have stricter land use planning. There's home rule states. There's states you have participatory systems that are open town meeting. You have different structures of governance. So really, when you look at the United States, we have a patchwork of governance that's really hard to even make sense of, right? So even the metropolitan research is really difficult to do because, you'll be saying, oh, I'm researching this region, and someone will say to you, well, that's Boston, that's Portland, that's this. So now in the United States, Portland, Oregon is known for being a very strong regional system. And the book I wrote compares Boston, Denver, and Portland. And a lot of the people that I talked with would say, why are you even writing this book? Because, we're never going to get Portland, right? So don't even bother. And also, MAPC has had some success. We're doing voluntary work, and it's working and makes people comfortable. And we do all these visioning exercises, and there's a lot of research looking at these great visions. Envision Utah, Region 2040, Metro Future is Boston. And the sense also, it's sort of an Elinor Ostrom argument, if it's voluntary, it'll be more effective because the people helped create the solution. So one of the things that I've done is through my research is I examined Boston, Denver, and Portland. Boston, where the MAPC is the 3 minutes. All right, I'm almost out of here. All right, Boston MAPC is it's a regional planning, but it's not connected to the MPO, but it works with them. Denver, where they actually had money from being the MPO, so they could direct transportation dollars, and they also did sort of they did a voluntary urban growth boundary. And Portland, where they had much more authority, right? They had a state approach, they had an elected metropolitan governance, they had an urban growth boundary policy. And the thing is that people say that Portland, well, they're really liberal, they're super white, and they just love regulation. And what I am pushing back on is that assumption, right? What we need is a ref, right? Everybody wants, if we all want to do something the right way, we need to sit together and figure out how to do it. And then I need to make sure that you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it. Because if I do it and you don't do it, I end up with all the externalities of you not doing it, right? So these regional governance systems, in fact, can be built from the bottom up with community participation and collaboration among stakeholders. But we need to think about a framework where local governments can work together and in a regional system if we're going to solve regional problems. I also think, and this may be a little bit pie in the sky, but this idea of deliberative democracy, when the people in Portland, because planning matters at the regional level, they come to the meetings, they understand each other's problems, and they try to figure out ways to work together in a way that they do not do in Boston. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is I take attendance in my classes, right? I tell people, if you don't come to the meeting, it's a problem, because I want them to be there, right? I want it to matter. And I think the issue for us in the United States is our regional governance right now doesn't matter. You don't have to come. You can come, I would come if you want, but it would be fun. But in the future, it's gonna matter, right? We're gonna have to, so we're gonna need some real focus on how to get people in the room and how to have these conversations. So basically, we're going to have to do it differently. It's urgent. We don't have the systems to solve large-scale climate crises, and so it's going to need collaboration. We're going to have to connect data to action, and we're going to have to be innovative. Let's try something. Let's see if it works. Here, and maybe this is maybe we need some new institutions. And here I am, this is the climate march. Here's the kids who basically are asking us to do something. So thank you for your time.
I'm Maria Three Serrana. I'm an environmental educator at Southern Connecticut State and State University. So my question is, what's the percentage of research that's data-driven, scientific? What's the percentage of this research being translated into policy? And what are the factors that prevent it from being translated into policies? And also what you were saying, what would be the picture of these new institutions that would make sure that the researches are actually translated?
All right, that's a great question. I think one thing is I have no idea, right? So, you know, like as a faculty member, I do research, right? But yesterday on the train coming up here, I probably had my biggest policy win ever because I saw Governor Hickenlooper in the train station and I gave him my book. And then Bill Weld sat next to me and I was having like a weird governor day and I happened to have 2 copies of the book and I gave him the book, right? But like as an academic, that's where we need to build that pipeline to policymakers. So I actually would love policymakers to tell me, hey Tina, you and your students I don't know the answer to this question. You got to help me, and then we're going to try it, and then you're going to evaluate it, right? And so that's this sort of community-engaged research. I'm doing a project, which is we have like this community-driven research day, so I just got a little bit of money so basically the Clean Air Council said, you know, we want to know if education changes behavior. So they're partnering with me. We're using these little air monitors to think about it. But we need more of that, and we need much bigger scale, and it means also that, you know, the incentives at the university are very much individual. So we kind of need to break that, and we need to recognize that there's also a lot of people with a lot of knowledge who are not in universities, and they need to help guide the research that we're doing. So.
Hi, I'm Cristobal. I'm a first-year student at Jackson Institute. I wanted to ask on, you mentioned Portland and on the authority they had in terms of strength. I wanted to ask if you could elaborate on that, on the balance between having a centralized, strong local or regional government to manage things versus a more democratic approach.
Yeah, so I think one thing so when people think about Portland, they always think like there's this group in the port and they just like tell the local governments exactly what to do. But actually, the local governments come and they work together to make a set of policies that they can all agree to, but there's power to implement them. So once the policies are agreed to, if you're running off building your shopping mall in my urban growth boundary, I'm gonna come after you, right? There's power, right? Versus in these other more regulatory, like, well, it'd be really nice not to build a shopping mall at the border next to the da-da-da, but then they do it anyway, and I don't have any power to control it. So it's the idea of authority, and I think this is the thing we need to think about. Authority is, it comes from the people, and they're setting the guidelines, but there is a tool to make sure it happens, right? So all these sort of visioning, like Vision Utah, well, there are great ideas, but like, how do you implement it? Right? Are there any teeth to it? So, I mean, you know, Tim showed the thing and says, you know, there are 3 things in environmental policy, right? You can regulate people, incentivize them, or tax them, right? So we need to use that to get people to behave. Otherwise, if we're only in our own system, the current system is designed to keep property values high in your community. Make sure the amenities in your community are great, right? That is not how you build a resilient region. So we need to figure out what are the shared things that we all need in a region, what are the crises that are gonna happen in this region, and how are we gonna get ready for it? There's not enough money, right? This current system it's not gonna protect you. You're gonna have to make these decisions. So.
James Hawley, very briefly, why do people attend the regional meetings in Portland? What's the incentive?
Because if you don't attend them, you might not get transportation money, and they might not hear what your community's issue is, so you might not get written into the document, and because it matters, right? So there's actually a policy, the policy is moving forward, so you're either in the policy putting your ideas in, or you're not, right? So I will go to the meeting because it matters, right? So all those planners in Portland, they show up at Portland Metro, they know each other, they talk to each other, it's a regular thing, they're always there, versus in these bigger sort of more visioning, we would like a sustainable region, there's not that systematic kind of relationship that we know each other, there's gonna be rules, there's gonna be regulations. So I think it's that something's at stake, right? There's also transportation dollars at stake. So if you do the good things that we want you to do, you are gonna get the TIP funding, the transportation improvement dollars. So I think you need money, regulation, and so the state can help us do that. But that we kind of know how to get people to do the right thing, but we need to, so the money, incentive, tax, regulation, like we can get them to, but you have to be willing to sort of admit you have a problem in order to get to push for forcing people to do something. So does that make sense?
Any last questions? Okay, lunch is ready. So we'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.